After my grandfather passed away, I went off the grid for 6 months pretending to be a trust fund brat blowing money on parties. My parents jumped at the chance to snatch control of the company and started spreading rumors that I had lost my mind. They had no idea I was working in the shadows, pulling strings and setting a trap for them. I was just waiting for the moment they felt untouchable to finally close the net and settle the score once and for all. My parents were a couple of reckless sociopaths, which is why my grandfather left every single share of the family business to me before he died. I never actually cared about running a corporate empire. I was perfectly happy just collecting dividend checks and staying out of the way. But after 6 months of traveling, I returned to Manhattan to find my home turned upside down. My father had moved a girl in, claiming she was the daughter of his deceased first love and declaring her his official goddaughter. My mother was even worse, dragging home 2 illegitimate children as if they were stray puppies. This was the reality of the Sterling family, a couple trapped in a hollow business marriage who had been leading separate, scandalous lives since the day I was born. They played their twisted games with zero shame, constantly alternating between attacking each other and forming alliances. I didn't have the energy to deal with their drama because I was raised by my grandfather and never felt even a shred of affection for either of them. It was glaringly obvious that they were both circling my inheritance like vultures, and that was exactly when I decided to show them who I really was. Their marriage had never been about love. It was just a strategic merger, a corporate project they were forced to finish. Producing an heir was just a checkbox on their to-do list, and once I was born, they went right back to their separate affairs. Because they were so dysfunctional, my grandfather didn't leave a single cent or a single share to my deadbeat father when he passed. Instead, he handed the entire kingdom over to me. I, James Sterling, had no desire to spend my life in a boardroom. The moment I stepped back into our estate in the Hamptons, I noticed the housekeeper looking at me with a pained, awkward expression. She looked like she was dying to warn me, but was too terrified to speak, so I knew immediately that something was wrong. My parents were undoubtedly up to their old tricks again. I followed the sound of voices echoing from the formal dining room. I walked in to find 5 people gathered around the long mahogany table. My parents were there, of course. My father, Robert, looked every bit the distinguished gentleman. Though beneath the tailored suit, he was nothing more than a serial philanderer. My mother, Eleanor, was dressed like a sophisticated socialite, but her capacity for chaos matched my father's perfectly. Seated next to Robert was a beautiful young woman in her early 20s who looked incredibly innocent and soft. I didn't need an introduction to know exactly who she was. Her face was a carbon copy of Lucille, my father's first love who had died years ago. Seated next to my mother were 2 young men, also in their early 20s. They were both sharp-featured and strikingly handsome. When our eyes met, they didn't look away. They stared me down with blatant, aggressive provocation. It was obvious these were the 2 illegitimate sons my mother had been hiding. Eleanor flashed a fake smile and said, "James, you're finally home. Come sit down and join us for dinner." She actually got up to pull out a chair for me, which was a first. My father just snorted coldly and muttered, "You've been gone for months, and you can't even offer a basic greeting? Is this the lack of manners your grandfather instilled in you? Or did you just forget I existed?" Robert snapped. I leaned back and replied lazily, "I treated you like a joke back then, and you were happy enough to play the part." I slumped into my seat with zero energy while the maid hurried over with a warm towel for my hands. A second later, one of the guys next to my mother spoke up. "You really are a piece of work, aren't you? Is that how you talk to your own father?" That was Ethan, the older of my mother's secret brood. "I heard you have some kind of toxic masculinity complex," he sneered. "You really are a nasty piece of work coming home just to talk trash to your old man." I gave a dry laugh, figured they were just trying out some trendy buzzwords they'd heard on TikTok, and didn't bother engaging. Instead, I shifted my focus to the girl sitting next to my father. I must have been staring too hard because the girl, Ava, started to look visibly uncomfortable. She tucked her hair behind her ear and looked down at her plate, refusing to make eye contact. Robert slammed his hand onto the table, making the silverware rattle, and barked, "You're asking for a fight, James." I just smirked and looked him in the eye. Dad, are you absolutely sure Ava isn't actually yours? He turned red instantly and shot back. Of course she isn't. She's Lucille's daughter. After Lucille died, the poor girl had no one left, so I did the right thing and brought her here. Robert's eyes narrowed with suspicion, looking at me as if I were a predator about to pounce on his precious Ava. I leaned forward with a sharp grin. Look, we all know Lucille was the one that got away, the great tragedy of your life. But there is no reason for your old regrets to haunt us. I think Ava is gorgeous, so why don't we just make her my wife? The moment the suggestion left my lips, my father's face turned a deep, furious shade of purple. Ava looked absolutely terrified, her eyes welling up with tears as she shrunk back in her chair. Ethan slammed his water glass down so hard it nearly shattered. He surged to his feet and pointed a finger right at my face, yelling, "James, you must have a death wish. Do you have any idea how long I've been pursuing Ava?" he screamed. Unbelievable. This family was already a train wreck, but this was a whole new level of disaster. My mother's secret son was actually lusting after my father's dead lover's daughter. The kid certainly had balls, I'll give him that. While Ethan continued his little tantrum, I didn't even acknowledge his existence. I just turned to my mother and said, "Eleanor, are you really just going to let your son behave like this at the dinner table?" Eleanor gave a strained, awkward laugh before trying to play the peacemaker. "James, darling, Ethan has been very devoted to Ava for a while now. Just let him have this one for my sake, okay?" Hannah, the younger one, stood up and scoffed. "Mom, stop groveling. He only acted like he owned the place because we weren't here. Now that we've arrived, his time at the top is officially over." Ethan nodded aggressively in agreement. "Forget about Ava for a second. You need to tell the board that my sister and I are joining the firm. I'll take the CEO position, and James can be my assistant if he behaves." I raised an eyebrow, a slow smile spreading across my face as I nodded. "Sure, why not? I'll make the arrangements personally." I didn't mind a little trash talk, but they were getting ambitious. The moment they started talking about seizing control of the company, they were officially coming for my money. I remembered my grandfather on his deathbed, gripping my hand with surprising strength as he whispered, "Keep the company in your hands, James, no matter what. If you don't," he had warned, "your parents will discard you the second you're no longer useful." It felt like a cliche from a bad soap opera, but here I was living it. They were finally hitting me where it hurt. "All right," I said, my voice cold. "Let's stop pretending then. I'm heading up to my room to get some sleep." I stood up and walked away without waiting for an answer. I could practically feel my parents exhaling in unison behind me, as if a massive weight had just been lifted from their shoulders. I hadn't even reached the stairs when Ethan yelled, "I didn't give you permission to leave yet, you prick." I stopped in my tracks and slowly turned around. "Is there something else you need to get off your chest?" I asked calmly. "James, you're a stain on this family," Ethan screamed. "Just a toxic little bastard. You honestly think you're fit to run a company? You're a joke. My sister and I actually have the talent to lead. Hand the keys over to us and sign your shares over by morning," he demanded. I tilted my head, looking directly at Eleanor. "Did you coach him on that line, Mother?" I asked. She just looked at me with a pained, pathetic expression. "James, please just do it for me. I've been through so much," she said, forcing a sickly sweet smile. She clearly thought my quiet behavior earlier was a sign of weakness, and she was already trying to walk all over me. Her tone was getting bolder by the second. I smiled and nodded, resting my hands flat on the polished wood of the dining table. "If it's so hard for you, then maybe you should just keep your mouth shut." Without warning, I surged upward, putting all my weight into the edge of the table and flipping the entire thing over. Porcelain plates, crystal glasses, and greasy remains of the dinner flew through the air, drenching everyone in soup and red wine. The room erupted into a chorus of panic screams. The only person who didn't flinch was our head butler, who had seen me do much worse over the years. People love to gossip about my supposed anger issues and toxic behavior, but the truth is simpler. My grandfather taught me from day one that if I wasn't the most dangerous person in the room, my own parents would tear me apart and devour the remains. I learned early on that physical action was the only language they understood, so after a while, everyone just assumed I was mentally unstable. While they were still covered in gravy and shock, I reached my hand out to the side. The butler didn't even hesitate before slapping a heavy cast iron skillet into my palm. I gripped the handle tight and lunged forward as they watched in horror. Ethan was the only one quick enough to try and intercept me. I swung the skillet in a wide arc like I was hitting a home run, catching him right across the jaw with a loud metallic crack. He let out a strangled cry and collapsed backward, landing in a heap of broken china. The rest of them froze, paralyzed by pure terror. No one dared to breathe. I walked over and ground my designer boot into Ethan's cheek, looking down at him. "You kept talking about my toxic behavior," I whispered. "So you should have known exactly how brutal I get when someone threatens what's mine. Knowing my reputation, what made you think it was a good idea to push me? Did your mother drop you on your head the day you were born?" "Someone call the police," Hannah screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "He's a maniac. Call 911. I turned my eyes toward her, my expression terrifyingly calm. "I'm hitting him, not you. Why are you making so much noise? Do you want to be next?" I stared her down until she practically withered and took a step back. Eleanor finally found her voice, stuttering. "James, please. They're young and foolish. Don't take it personally." I looked at her and tilted my head. "Young and foolish," I repeated. "And what's your excuse? You're in your 50s and you're still acting like their little lapdog. Did you even think for a second about asking my permission before bringing these two mistakes into my house? You dumped them here and think you can start a fight with me in my own dining room. Did you honestly think my silence lately meant I'd grown soft?" Robert couldn't take it anymore and lunged forward, yelling, "James, that is your mother. You will not speak to her in that." Crack. I swung the skillet again, but he caught the blow with his forearm in a move so practiced it was almost pathetic. He had clearly spent years learning how to block my outbursts. You monster," he stammered, his arm trembling. He was shaking with rage, but was too terrified to say another word. I gave a cold, joyless laugh. "Don't push me to actually lose my temper." I turned to Ava, grabbed her chin, and forced her to look at me. "And as for you," I said, "stay out of my way. If you think a few tears are going to make me go easy on you, you're dead wrong." I let go of her face and walked upstairs to my suite. The second I closed the door, I pulled out my phone and messaged my lead assistant. I told him to give me a full breakdown of any recent activity at Sterling Global. He reported that there hadn't been any major shakeups yet, though Ava had already been added to the payroll in a low-level administrative role. As for the two brothers, they'd been seen parading around the office with Eleanor, acting like they owned the place before they'd even signed an employment contract. They were already trying to mark their territory. Thankfully, the company was still running on the momentum of the strategies I'd put in place before my sabbatical. Revenue was steady and the new acquisitions were on track. I took a deep breath and then asked about the current mood of the board of directors. The board was mostly made up of old-school fossils who had been with my grandfather for decades. The second he was gone, they tried to stage a coup and turn me into a figurehead. I'd had to play dirty to keep them in line back then, but they were never truly loyal. They might have played nice for a while, but I knew they were just waiting for a weakness. With my parents bringing new players into the house, something was definitely brewing. However, my assistant noted that the board had been eerily silent for weeks. They weren't making any waves, which was the biggest red flag of all. Silence meant they were coordinating something big. I hung up the phone and sent out a few encrypted iMessages to my contacts in the city. I spent the next hour calling our key partners in London and Tokyo, keeping the conversation light, but making sure they knew I was back in control. I've always hated the corporate world because it's nothing but a game of chess played by snakes. Constantly watching your back is exhausting, and honestly, I'd rather be on a beach somewhere. That evening, I decided to eat dinner in my room alone. Out of pure boredom, I opened the security app on my laptop to check the house cameras. It didn't take long to find the new guests huddled in the home theater room. It was Ethan, Hannah, and Ava. Ethan was leaning in close to her, saying, "Don't worry, Ava. As long as I'm here, James won't touch you." His face was a mess of purple bruises from the skillet, but he was still trying to play the hero. Ava looked at him with a cold, detached expression. "What I'm doing is my own choice, Ethan," she said. "We aren't the same. You're just here for the money. I'm here for blood. I couldn't care less about the sterling fortune. I just want to see James in the ground." She spoke with a chilling finality before standing up and walking out of the room. She wanted me dead? Revenge for what? I'd never even met the girl before today. The ice-cold woman on the monitor was a complete departure from the trembling girl who'd been crying into her soup an hour ago. This was getting interesting, and I wanted to see exactly what her game was. About 10 minutes later, I saw her enter her bedroom on the 3rd floor. She locked the door behind her, but when she turned around, she found me leaning against the wall in the shadows. She nearly jumped out of her skin and opened her mouth to scream, but I was faster, clamping my hand firmly over her lips. I leaned in close, my eyes narrowed. "So, you want me dead for revenge? Why don't you tell me exactly what I did to earn that much hate?" She was trembling, her breath hot against my palm. She wasn't stupid, though. She clearly realized I must have heard her on the cameras. "Blink if you're ready to talk instead of scream," I whispered. She blinked twice. I had to admit, her eyes were strikingly beautiful when she wasn't pretending to be a victim. I let go and walked over to her bed, sitting on the edge and gesturing to the space beside me. "Seat. We'll both be more comfortable if we just talk this out." She looked disgusted, but didn't argue. She sat down, keeping her distance, and spoke with surprising composure. "Judging by your confusion, you really aren't faking it. You honestly have no idea why I want you gone." "Not a clue," I replied honestly. I watched her as she processed this. She gave a slow nod. "Then Robert lied to me. He told me that you were the one responsible for my mother's death." I let out a dry laugh. "And why would I do that? What would I possibly gain by killing my father's old flame? In some twisted movie, the son might do it to defend his mother's honor, but you saw us at dinner. I don't give a damn about either of my parents. And since you aren't actually Robert's biological daughter, you aren't a threat to my inheritance. Why would I bother murdering someone who doesn't matter to me?" I leaned closer and lowered my voice. "Ask yourself, Ava, who actually benefited from your mother's passing?" She went quiet, her brow furrowed in thought as she weighed my words. "After my own father passed away, Robert stepped in to help manage our family assets," she whispered. "The shares are technically mine, but he's the one who controls every major contract and every cent of the revenue. He told me he was getting me a job at Sterling Global so I could get close enough to kill you. But in reality, he's just keeping me in a basement office where I can't see what he's doing with my family's money." The realization hit her hard, and her eyes burned with a newfound rage. "I'm going to find the truth myself," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't trust you, James. Not yet. If you hit a wall, you know where to find me," I said as I stood up. I'd planted the seed, and that was enough for now. There was no way a snake like my father was doing anything out of the goodness of his heart. He wouldn't have brought Ava within a mile of this house if she didn't have something he wanted to steal. The next morning, I headed into the city. 30 minutes later, I was walking into the Sterling Global boardroom. The board members trickled in, offering fake smiles and asking about my vacation in Europe. I gave them short, meaningless answers until everyone was seated. Once the room was full, I took my place at the head of the table. "I'm not here to waste time," I began. "I'm initiating 4 new major developments for the 3rd quarter." Before I could finish, Mr. Miller, a man who had been a thorn in my side for years, spoke up with a sneer. "James, you're the chairman, yet you treat this place like a hobby," Miller said. "It's frankly irresponsible to the shareholders for you to be MIA for months at a time." Mr. Thompson nodded in agreement from across the table. "He's right," Thompson added. "This company is too big for a part-timer. It's time you step down and let your father, Robert, take the reins. For the sake of stability." Miller didn't even wait for a rebuttal. "All those in favor of James Sterling's immediate resignation, raise your hands." This wasn't a discussion. It was a coordinated hit. They had clearly met behind my back to finalize the coup. Thompson's hand shot up, followed by half a dozen of his lackeys. The few who were actually loyal to my grandfather's legacy stayed silent, looking around the room nervously as the majority turned against me. Right on cue, The double doors swung open. My parents marched in like they already owned the place, with Ethan, Hannah, and Ava trailing behind them. Ethan's jaw was still discolored and swollen, making him look absolutely ridiculous. Robert let out a theatrical sigh, shaking his head. James, look at what you've done. You're too volatile for this seat. You can't just assault your own family because you're having a bad day. What happens when a negotiation goes south? He continued. Do you start swinging at our partners too? Eleanor stepped forward, her voice dripping with fake concern. Members of the board, as his mother, I have to be honest with you. James suffers from severe, uncontrollable aggression, she claimed. He is ruthless and mentally unstable. He simply isn't fit to hold a position of such immense responsibility. Ethan began to sniffle for dramatic effect. I just asked him a simple question at dinner, and he nearly broke my jaw. Ethan whined. How can a man like that represent our family's legacy? Hannah chimed in, pointing a finger toward Ava. And he's been harassing Ava since the moment he stepped through the door, Hannah added. If we hadn't been there to protect her, God knows what he would have done. He's a danger to everyone around him. We cannot allow a predator to run this company, she concluded. Every eye in the room turned toward Ava. They were all waiting for her to play her part and deliver the final blow that would strip me of my title. But instead of crying, Ava spoke with a clear, steady voice. He was just playing around with me. A stunned silence fell over the room as she walked right up to my chair. She rested her hand on my shoulder and looked at the board. Actually, I've grown quite fond of James. He's charming in his own way. Then, leaning down, she whispered so only I could hear, go with it. Take my hand, she whispered. Make it look real. I reached up and interlaced my fingers with hers, leaning my head slightly toward her. To anyone watching, we looked like a couple sharing an intimate moment. She was brilliant. She knew that by siding with me, she was also escaping my father's thumb. Robert looked like he was about to have a stroke. Ava, do you have any idea what you're saying? I'm falling in love. Robert, she said with a sweet, mocking smile. That one sentence felt like a physical blow to everyone in the room. The elaborate character assassination they had planned was falling apart before their eyes. As for the fight, Ava continued. Ethan provoked him. He started it, and James finished it. It had nothing to do with dinner etiquette. Ethan looked like he wanted to scream. Why are you taking his side? He demanded. Is he threatening you, Ava? Tell the truth. Ethan was completely lost, unable to comprehend how his perfect plan had backfired. But Mr. Thompson wasn't ready to give up just yet. James's reputation for violence is well documented in this city, Thompson said coldly. We cannot have a mentally unstable individual at the helm of a billion-dollar corporation. I call for the vote to proceed immediately. More hands went up around the table, and the motion passed by a landslide. The board had officially voted me out. My father straightened his tie and strolled over to me, a look of pure triumph on his face. My dear son, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, you should have stayed in Europe. While you were playing, I was busy making sure the world moved on without you. He reached out to pat my shoulder. Now move. This is my chair now. Before his hand could touch me, I grabbed his wrist, twisted it, and in one fluid motion, I threw him over my shoulder. He hit the mahogany table with a sickening thud, letting out a sharp yelp of pain. My own security team, who had been waiting outside, stepped in and locked the doors. The board members who had just voted against me were suddenly very, very quiet. I sat back down in the chairman's seat as if nothing had happened. I looked around at the traitors. I've memorized every face that voted yes today. You have exactly two options. Option 1. Sell me every single one of your shares at a massive discount. Option 2. Stay and watch your lives fall apart. I finished. You can't do this, James. We have laws in this country. Miller yelled, banging his fist on the table. I laughed. I love the law, Miller. That's why I've spent the last 6 months documenting every illegal offshore account and every bribe you and Thompson have ever taken. The public might not know yet, but the SEC is going to have a field day with my files. And don't even get me started on your sons, I added, looking Thompson in the eye. I have enough evidence on their little drug smuggling ring to make sure they spend the rest of their lives in federal prison. Their faces went ghostly white in an instant. As for that little vote to remove me, consider it vetoed. My grandfather made sure I have absolute veto power over any board decision. Now sit down and shut up. The silence in the room was deafening. I stood up and reached for Ava's hand. You have 30 minutes to sign the transfer papers. Don't waste my time. As we walked out, you could have heard a pin drop in that room. Even Robert had stopped groaning on the table. Once we were back in my private office, I poured Ava a cup of hot ginger tea. She sat on the velvet sofa, looking at the cup with wide eyes. How did you know I was on my cycle? She asked, clearly taken aback. I have a very keen sense for blood, I teased. Her face flushed a deep crimson as she realized I was messing with her. She looked ready to throw the tea at me, so I held up my hands in defense. Relax, I'm kidding. I own this building, Ava. My people are everywhere. The second you asked the maid for supplies, I was notified. You have people reporting on my bathroom needs? You're a total creep. Ava snapped. I looked at her with a dead serious expression. If you had actually been my enemy, I would have used that information to make your life a living hell. I would have slipped you something to make your cramps unbearable and keep you bedridden for a week. That's how I win. The color drained from her face, and she looked at me with genuine fear. You're a monster, she whispered. She stared at the tea as if it were poisoned. I laughed softly. Drink it, Ava. You proved today that you aren't my enemy. I sat down beside her, the weight of the day finally hitting me. My parents have been trying to find ways to get rid of me since I was a kid, I said quietly. Why? She asked, looking genuinely confused. Even predators don't kill their own offspring. I was raised by my grandfather because they were too busy having affairs and blowing through money to care if I was alive. I didn't have a childhood. I had a survival training course. To them, I wasn't a son. I was an obstacle to their inheritance. They couldn't control me through love, so they tried other methods. My grandfather made it clear I was his sole heir. The only way for them to get the sterling fortune was to wait for me to die, or to speed up the process. I grew up checking the brakes on my bike and making sure my food didn't taste like almonds. If I wanted to survive past 18, I had to become more dangerous than the people trying to kill me. I gave a small, bitter smile that didn't reach my eyes. Ava looked at me with pity in her eyes. Stop, she said softly. You're making me feel sorry for you, and I really don't want to. At least my parents loved me, even if my mother's life was a mess. You've never had anyone, have you? I shrugged and leaned in. Then maybe you should give me a hug. I started to tilt my head toward her shoulder, but she scrambled back instantly. Don't you dare touch me, James, she said, though her eyes weren't as cold as before. A sharp knock at the door broke the moment. I moved back to my desk and composed myself while Ava went to answer it. Just as I expected, it was the board members, led by Thompson. He glared at me with pure venom. You think you've won, James? You'll pay for this. I just smiled and pointed toward the hallway. Actually, Thompson, the deal is off. I don't want your shares anymore. You can leave. I've decided I'd much rather watch your entire legacy burn to the ground instead. Thompson stammered, unable to find words, his face drained of all color. I waved my hand, and my assistant entered the room with a thick file. He placed a file on my desk. It contained every photo and ledger related to his son's narcotics distribution network. I'll call the district attorney now, my assistant said before turning to leave. Thompson looked like he was about to collapse. Beads of cold sweat rolled down his face. James, please don't do this. I'll give you whatever you want. Just give me one more chance to fix this. Oh, so now you're sorry? I asked with a sharp laugh. You're not sorry for what you did. You're just terrified that you're caught. I told the board I needed to make an example out of someone, and you volunteered. You were so eager to lead the charge against me. It would be rude of me not to repay the favor. Two of my security guards stepped forward and grabbed him by the arms. Keep him in the waiting room until the police arrive, I commanded. He's a flight risk. Don't let him out of your sight. I waved them off, and they dragged the sobbing man away. With Thompson's ruin as a warning, the remaining board members suddenly found it very easy to agree to my terms. They signed the transfer papers without a single complaint. As they scrambled to leave the office, I gave them one last piece of advice. If I were you, I'd get your families out of New York by tonight. Things are about to get very messy. 2 hours later, the office was quiet. I was leaning back in my chair when the door opened again. My parents walked in, with their illegitimate duo trailing behind them like wounded animals. To the outside world, these four probably seemed like bitter rivals, but I knew the truth. They might hate each other, but they were all parasites feeding off the same host. They were a team when it came to stealing from me. When my mother needed muscle to fight off her own greedy relatives, my father acted as her enforcer. Now that my father wanted my shares, she was more than happy to help him hold the knife to my throat. Ethan was glaring at Ava, his eyes filled with pathetic desperation. Ava, why? How could you choose him over me after everything I've done for you? Ava didn't even give him the satisfaction of a glance. She just stood behind me, resting her hands on my shoulders in a display of loyalty. We looked like a power couple, and it was clearly killing him. I looked over at Eleanor. Your son is truly pathetic, Eleanor. We're in the middle of a corporate takeover, and he's whining about a girl. Did you forget to give him a brain when you were raising him in secret? My mother's face turned a sickly ashen color, and she snapped at Ethan to be quiet. He flinched instantly, clearly more terrified of her than he was of me. I lit a cigarette and let the smoke curl into the air. You've seen what I'm capable of today. I can dismantle your lives just as easily as I dismantled Thompson's. Don't think for a second that being family will protect you. Stay out my way. This is me being nice. If I have to move against you again, I won't be so gentle. I leaned back, watching them realize that their war was lost. Robert wasn't done yet, though. He was too cowardly to come after me directly, so he went after Ava's family holdings. Within days, he had maneuvered himself into control of several of her key subsidiaries. He was trying to strip her of everything. But I was 10 steps ahead of him. I made a few quiet calls and moved some capital around, and before he could even celebrate his victory, I had squeezed him out of the market entirely. He spent his days sulking in the mansion, looking like a ghost haunting his own halls. He was too terrified to even look me in the eye, but he took every opportunity to scream at Ava when he thought I wasn't listening. I got tired of the drama, so I moved Ava into my wing of the house. I've never claimed to be a saint, and within a week, I made sure everyone knew she belonged to me and me alone. The news spread through the social circles like wildfire. Meanwhile, the Thompson family was being dismantled by federal agents. One by one, they were led away in handcuffs while the tabloids had a field day. Word on the street was that they were looking at 20 years minimum. I caught Ethan and Hannah on the security cameras trying to play detective, searching my private study for any dirt they could find on me. They were desperate to find a scandal they could use as leverage. But the only thing the police could ever pull on me was a few domestic disturbance calls from when I'd lost my temper with Robert and Eleanor. Those are barely even misdemeanors in our world. It was just family drama, nothing that could actually touch my position. My mother eventually realized how dangerous their snooping was and forced them to stop. Then, one evening, I came home to find a massive, celebratory feast laid out on the table. Eleanor told me they had finally decided to move to their villa in the south of France and wanted one last dinner together. Robert even seemed to have accepted defeat, agreeing to go with her. I sat down, but I didn't touch a single bite of the food. I wasn't an idiot. I knew they were probably trying to poison me as a last resort. Ava had anticipated this and brought me a separate plate she had prepared herself. I only ate what came from her hands. I wouldn't touch anything Robert or Eleanor had been near. As the meal went on, I noticed the four of them exchanging strange, knowing glances. They looked almost giddy, as if they were waiting for a punchline. Their smug expressions made my blood run cold. I turned to look at Ava, but she wasn't looking at me. She was leaning back, her face a mask of cold indifference. "You killed her, James," she said, her voice like ice. "You killed my mother. Did you really think I could love a monster with your history of violence?" She didn't need to finish. I suddenly felt a wave of dizziness wash over me, my vision blurring at the edges. My limbs felt like lead. Eleanor stood up, a triumphant grin on her face. "Don't fight it, James." Ava was the one who poisoned your food. She's been working with us the whole time." Robert let out a booming laugh, the sound of a man who had finally regained his pride. "You're smart, James, but you're arrogant. You thought you turned her against us, but she's been our most loyal asset from day one." I slumped against the table, struggling to breathe. "What?" I managed to wheeze out. Eleanor leaned down and stroked my hair, her eyes burning with pure hatred. "Because as long as you're breathing, we're just your subordinates. We want our lives back, James. That old man should have left the empire to us, not a brat like you," she spat. "We're the Sterlings, not you." Ava just watched me with those cold, beautiful eyes, waiting for me to fade away. Just as they began to celebrate, I sat bolt upright, the lethargy vanishing from my face instantly. I leaned back and clapped my hands twice. David and a dozen armed security guards flooded into the room, surrounding the table. My parents looked like they'd seen a ghost. Ava didn't look surprised at all. She just walked behind my chair and draped her arms around my neck. "Did you honestly think I was dumb enough to believe your pathetic stories?" she asked them. She looked Robert dead in the eye. "You did kill my mother, you pathetic snake." James found the bank transfers and the medical reports to prove it. I looked at my parents, who were now trembling in their seats. "You were so proud of your plan at the facility that you didn't notice the microphones in the walls," I said, pulling out my phone and pressing play. The recording was crystal clear. Robert's voice boasted about how he'd poisoned Lucille, how he was going to frame me as a lunatic, and how he planned to liquidate the Sterling Empire the moment I was gone. "So much for your secret alliance," I said, sliding the phone across the table. "I've already forwarded that file to the NYPD and every member of the board. You're finished." Eleanor collapsed onto the floor, wailing like a wounded animal. Robert tried to lunge at me in a fit of blind rage, but my guards pinned him to the floor before he could even get close. Ethan and Hannah were literally cowering under the table like children. I stood up and took Ava's hand. "Clean this up, David," I said. "Call the police and have them removed. I never want to see their faces on Sterling property again." We stepped out onto the terrace, and for the first time in years, the air felt clean. Ava leaned her head against my shoulder. "What's next for us, James?" I smiled and kissed her forehead. "Somewhere far away from here. We're going to live the life my grandfather wanted for me." We walked toward the car, leaving the Sterling legacy and its ghost behind for good. There are some people in this world you don't need to forgive. You just need to make sure they never have the power to hurt you again.